Hi and welcome to the Mike's DIY Tips channel on YouTube. I'm Mike. In this video I thought it would be useful to gather together some useful ideas on tool improvisation. These are the ideas that enable you to carry on working even though you haven't got the correct tool for the job. I hope you find some of these ideas stimulating so that you can think up other ideas of your own. I should say that some of the improvisations shown have already been featured in my previous DIY videos on this channel. So for my first improvisation tip, here's a question. How would you draw a line at 90 degrees if you hadn't got one of these? Or a line at 45 degrees if you hadn't got one of these? The answer is you use one of these. It's a simple piece of print paper which is always cut at 90 degrees. So just settle the edge of the paper on the edge of your board, get a reasonably sharp pencil, a couple of pencil lines there, and you can join up with a ruler. So now you've got a line at 90 degrees. If you want 45 degrees using the piece of paper, just fold it carefully like that, and now you've got a 45 degree angle. Settle it on the edge carefully, a couple of lines like that, use a straight edge like this, and there's your line at 45 degrees. Next, if you want to drill a hole in a wooden board or piece of solid wood and you haven't got the right size twist drill, for smaller holes you can use a cut-off nail. So you need to cut off the head so that this part of the nail will go in the chuck of the drill. And for a long panel pin like that, not very thick, we can use some cutters like this. So that's good enough to go in the chuck of the drill. For something a bit thicker like that, I'm going to show you how to grip it and cut it, and in the course of doing that I'm showing you another tip as well. This is a pair of grips, and the grip there is controlled by this screw here, and so then we can put those in an ordinary vise like that. So that's nice and firm, and we get a little hacksaw. Now if we decide we're cutting there, I've deliberately put the cutting point right up against the jaws of the grip so that I can use that as a guide for the blade. So there we are, the head's cut off, and that will go in the chuck of the drill. And we can do the same with this one. So now I'm all set up. I've got the small panel pin one already mounted in the chuck of my hand brace. 9mm plywood. I just want to show you how easily it goes through. So some down pressure, but not violently so, and just keep turning, and I'm through already. So let's try the big nail. Now because we're doing this with nails, nails aren't always perfectly formed, so when you rotate the nail you might get a little bit of wobble like on that, but it doesn't matter. So here we go again, some down pressure, keep turning. Takes a bit longer, but I'm through. Now I must show you something. That looks like a nice neat hole there, but it's burst through there. Now if you want to stop that happening, here's the way to do it. So what I've done now is, there's the plywood that we drilled before, and I've got a piece of scrap wood as a backing to it, gripped in the vise, so that those two pieces are gripped very tightly together. Now if I go again, drill a hole again, we should find it a lot tidier on the inside. there's the new hole. As you can see, it's much tidier. So we'll just do the same thing again with the power drill. It's obviously going to be quicker and easier. There we are. I'm going to show you another idea now to substitute for a nail punch. We can use another cut down nail, but instead of cutting the head off, we're going to cut the point off so that we can use the nail as a nail punch. Now, I've already shown you these expanding grips, and basically it will adjust to whatever thickness you're trying to grip, and by adjusting this screw here you can make it self-lock, and you have to experiment with this just to get it exactly right. So that has just gripped the nail, and I'm going to put that in the engineer's vise, so you can use your joiner's vise or engineer's vise. Don't forget to pick up the sharp bit if it falls on the floor. To open these again, you have to manipulate that lever and it opens again. So next we just need to file that off and make sure it's dead square and smooth. Just tilt the file a little bit so we can take off the sharp corner, and we're ready to go. And you can do the same for smaller nails using a smaller nail as a punch. So here's the nail punch in action. The nail is sticking up at the moment, so we need to drive it flush. Ordinarily we'd be using a nail punch like that to punch the nail in, but in this case I'm going to use my improvisation. So we put it fair and square on top of the nail head, and it just punches it in. Now the reason for punching nails in is either to make sure that the nail head is not sticking up, but more likely because you want to fill the hole and decorate over it. This is probably about as big as you can go in improvising a nail punch. On a smaller scale, using smaller nails, in other words, these are actually panel pins, I've got a smaller improvised nail punch using a thinner nail, so the diameter of the nail needs to match pretty well the diameter of the nail head. That is to avoid getting a very big indent in the wood itself, which you'd have to fill in. So there you are. Now I want to show you another trick relating to getting small panel pins started in the wood. If you find it difficult because you keep hitting your fingers with the hammer, here's an alternative idea. Get a pair of thin nosed pliers, grip the panel pin and just hold it in place while you get it started with the hammer. Here's another improvisation using a nail. This time it's a masonry nail which is hardened, and we can use it to put a centre punch mark on a glazed wall tile where we want to drill a hole. So just hold the nail in place and tap it lightly a few times. You don't want to hit it hard, and that's enough to make a little indent so that we can start the drill. See, the drill started straight away. Now this is an ordinary masonry drill. We don't want to use hammer action with this, it's just the rotary action. A better drill for drilling glazed wall tiles and glass is this special purpose glass and tile drill. As an alternative to the masonry nail, we can use an ordinary steel wood screw, which, because it's hardened, will do the same job. It'll make an indent in the tile, but only tap it lightly. Here's another improvisation using the adjustable grips. We've got a nail here sticking up, but it's lost its head. So what we do, we adjust these grips so that they grip the nail very tightly, like that, and we can use a claw hammer, and because the shaft wants to point that way, we have to put the claw hammer alongside the grips and just lever up, and out comes the nail. Now, I'm not saying that that will happen every time, because if your nail is very rusty, it could easily break off flush with the wood. Alternatively, we can put the grips on horizontally, leaving enough room underneath there to get the claw hammer, and then we can just lever up like that, and out comes the nail. Now, if by chance you haven't got a claw hammer, you might be able to use leverage principles as follows. I've put the grips on the nail's got no head, and if we put some suitable metal bar like that and get a screwdriver so that we can lever up, that brings the nail out. So if you're doing a woodworking job and you badly need a narrow chisel but you haven't got one, what's the nearest thing in your tool bag to a chisel? The answer is screwdrivers. Now, you won't want to use your best screwdriver, but it is possible to sharpen an old screwdriver and use it either temporarily as a chisel and then reinstate it as a screwdriver, or once you've converted it to a chisel, keep it for a future job. Now, I've done a bit of wood carving in the past, and this tiny screwdriver is only about 1mm wide at the end, but it enabled me to carry on with my carving and achieve the result I wanted. On a slightly bigger scale, that's an old electrical screwdriver, and this is an ordinary screwdriver which I've beveled there. When thinking about converting a screwdriver into a chisel, you need to bear in mind that any good quality screwdriver will have a hardened steel tip, which means that although you will make some headway with a file like that, it'll be very slow indeed. In actual fact, you spoil the file in the process. Next, you've got a grinding wheel in your electric drill, a diamond cutter or a carborundum stone. This is the best bet to get a good start. This is my grinding wheel set up, and what I normally do is put the screwdriver tip on the side of the wheel. If you put it on the front like that, it's very hard to control the angle that way as well as that way. So on here you can see what you're doing like that. You'll only get it so far with the grinding wheel, then you've got to finish off with something else. By the way, when using the grinding wheel, only put the screwdriver tip on for a short lengths of time and then dip it in water to keep it cool. If you let this get very hot, particularly if you go to red hot, you will have spoilt the quality of the hardened steel. Now, to finish off, I've got here a diamond sharpening stone. It's called a stone, but in truth it's just a piece of plastic, metal front and diamond particles stuck on. And a good way of holding it is on a piece of wood like this, and I've actually got a piece of wood like that which will grip in the vise, so the whole thing is firm and won't move around. To hold a screwdriver at a set angle, just like when you sharpen a real wood chisel, and I've done a video on sharpening blades if you want to have a look at it. Alternative to that is an oil stone. This is more messy because you need oil. and eventually you get to the finished job where your chisel is ready to use. So I've got a piece of oak hardwood here, and I'm just going to try the chisel out. And already, as you can see, it's cutting quite well. So that's a screwdriver turned into a chisel. Here's a situation where you want to cut a piece of thin aluminium, but if you try and use a hacksaw you've got problems of restrictions of the frame, and in any case it moves about and it's hard to grip and it's so flimsy it bends easily. So here's an alternative solution. This is a tile cutter. You drag it to score a glazed tile, and then eventually you can break it. Well, with the aluminium, it actually grooves the aluminium and digs in. So what I've done now is I've clamped the piece of aluminium with this scrap of plywood, 2 screws, one there, one there. That is holding it down so it can't move. The edge of the plywood is just set back slightly from the line of cut to allow for the thickness of the cutter, and then we just score it, and I can feel the edge of the cutter really digging in and scoring the aluminium. And we have to do this several times, and you have to be careful to keep on using the same place each time. So we just bend it up and down a few times until it breaks away. Now that is quite a nice straight edge. It's not too razor sharp, but it will need smoothing with a suitable file or fine sandpaper. An entirely different way of cutting sheet metal is to use a hammer and chisel. Now this is the sort of chisel that's used to break up brickwork or concrete, but in this case it's ideal for cutting metal, as I'll show you. This is a piece of 1mm thick steel plate. If we put it in there, lining up the line, the cut line, with the top of the engineer's vise, we can use any of these. That's quite narrow, this one's quite wide. The principle is to put the chisel blade dead against the metal and then turn the chisel slightly. So when I hit that chisel, it will only cut at this end here. And then as I keep tapping with the hammer and moving the chisel along, we will do the cutting further and further along. Now I can use an ordinary carpenter's hammer, and I'm not tapping very hard, but as you can probably see it's starting to cut, but I'm going to use the heavier hammer for greater effect. I'm hitting much harder now, and as you can see, quickly making progress. A nice straight cut. The metal is curled over a little bit because of the shearing action, but once we've filed that up we can get on with what we're trying to make out of this piece of metal. The engineer's vise has only got a certain depth here, so if you're trying to cut a big piece of metal, that's as deep as you can go. The other thing is, if you've got a longer piece of metal, you're not restricted because of the width of the vice jaw. You can set your metal up like that, start cutting, and when you get so far along, just readjust and move your metal along, cut a bit more, so in that sense you can cut quite a long piece. If it's a bit flimsy, you might want somebody to help you hold it. I hope that video gave you some good ideas on improvising tools. Now, if you like my videos and would like to subscribe to my channel, you can get automatic notification of when new videos launch. Just click on the circular icon appearing now on the left of the screen. Otherwise, I mentioned that I've made a video on sharpening blades. You can watch that video by clicking the icon appearing now. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope to see you again very soon.